and we teamed up with Representative Nancy Mace to get a motion for Pam Bondi to be essentially subpoenaed in front of our committee. We've been trying to do this and been making this request of Chairman Comer for months, and it hasn't happened. The fact that Pam Bondi, the AG, who's been responsible for hiding and deflecting and lying about the Epstein files, will now be in front of the committee doing the Epstein investigation is really, really important. So we're really.
You just heard the ranking member of the House Oversight Committee announce that Pam Bondi, the Attorney General of the United States, has been subpoenaed to testify under oath about the Epstein investigation, not by Democrats alone, with Republican votes including Nancy Mace and Lauren Boebert, and the questions they plan to ask go far beyond what any headline has captured. What happens when members of the president's own party vote to force his attorney general to testify under oath about the single most politically damaging investigation facing the White House? And what happens when the ranking member of the committee conducting that investigation says on camera that the precedent has now been set for the president himself to be called to testify? We got answers to both of those questions today, and the implications stretch far beyond Pam Bondi and far beyond the Epstein investigation. This is where the story takes a turn that the administration did not anticipate. The House Oversight Committee has been attempting to subpoena Attorney General Pam Bondi for months. The committee's ranking member, Representative Robert Garcia, confirmed that Chairman James Comer had repeatedly refused to act on the request. Democrats lacked the votes to force it on their own. That changed today when a unified Democratic caucus joined with Republican Representatives Nancy Mace and Lauren Boebert and, according to Garcia, a few others, to reach the threshold needed to issue the subpoena. Bondi will now be required to appear before the committee and answer questions under oath about her handling of the Epstein investigation. Now pay attention to this next part, because the specific questions Garcia outlined on camera represent a comprehensive roadmap of the cover-up allegations that have been building for months. He listed them directly. Why were the Epstein files originally on Bondi's desk? Why did the administration begin calling the investigation a hoax? Why did they attempt to end the investigation early? Why haven't the remaining files been released? Where are the missing documents? Why are files being brought in and taken out of the record? And why was the Department of Justice spying on members of Congress involved in the investigation? That is not a fishing expedition. That is a specific, detailed list of questions that reflects months of investigation by committee members who have been tracking anomalies in how the Epstein files have been handled. And Bondi will have to answer every one of them under oath, meaning any false statement carries the penalty of perjury. Here's the detail that changes everything about the political dynamics of this investigation. Garcia described what success would look like for the committee. He said, quote, "Success would be actually getting the Attorney General to explain to us why they have been involved in a White House cover-up. Who's directing this cover-up? Why are we protecting billionaires and co-conspirators?" Those are not cautiously worded allegations from a cautious politician. The ranking member of the Oversight Committee is using the phrase White House cover-up on camera without qualification. He is asserting that the cover-up is being directed by someone, and he wants to know who. And he is asserting that the purpose of the cover-up is to protect billionaires and co-conspirators. That language places the investigation squarely in the territory of obstruction of justice at the highest levels of government.
Look, we're going to try. I hope so. I think Trump is, he has lost some of his grip on some members of his party. The fact that we had some members actually join us, particularly Representative Mace, Representative Boebert, a few others, on this subpoena of the Attorney General, I think is pretty significant.
And this is where it gets consequential for the broader political picture. The fact that this subpoena required Republican votes to succeed means that Trump's grip on his own party has weakened on top. The one issue where the political pressure from the base is most intense, Garcia confirmed this directly. He said, quote, "Trump has lost some of his grip on some members of his party." And the fact that we had some members actually join us, particularly Representative Mace, Representative Boebert, a few others, on this subpoena of the Attorney General, I think is pretty significant. Mace and Boebert are not moderates. They are not members of the party who have historically broken with Trump. They are among his most visible supporters, and they voted to subpoena his Attorney General. The reason, according to Garcia, is simple math. Epstein accountability polls at over 70% with Republican voters. Garcia called it, quote, the single most bipartisan issue that's popular amongst both parties. And then he made a statement that should keep the White House up at night. He said, quote, it's Trump's worst political issue. He's more unpopular on Epstein than he is on issues around the economy. And healthcare, Trump's worst political issue, worse than the economy, worse than healthcare, and the members of his own party who live and die by their primary voters understand that. That is why Mace and Boebert voted the way they did. Not because they've turned against Trump, because their voters are demanding answers that the administration has been refusing to provide. Let me put this in perspective. The subpoena alone would be a major development, but Garcia went further, significantly further, when asked about the precedent that Chairman Comer established by hauling Bill and Hillary Clinton before the committee to testify. Garcia made the constitutional implication explicit. He said, quote, Donald Trump will be in front of our committee, whether he comes in now and he tries to defy us while he's president. He's not going to be the president forever. And now we have a congressional new precedent to be able to bring in former presidents, and we're going to do it. He then added that the precedent Comer set also extends to first ladies, saying, quote, we look forward to talking to Mistress Trump as well. The irony is structural and inescapable. James Comer, a Republican chairman, established the precedent that sitting and former presidents can be compelled to testify before congressional oversight committees. He did so to bring in the Clintons. That precedent now applies to Donald Trump. It applies permanently. It applies whether he cooperates or not, because as Garcia noted, he will not be president forever.
Administration officials who are also implicated in this. Kevin Warsh's name is in the files as Trump's pick for Fed chair. Howard Lutnick's, photo was in the Epstein files. Obviously, that they made an effort to suppress that information. Are some of these other administration officials who are directly implicated in the files going to be called to testify as well?
And the scope extends beyond Bondi and beyond Trump. The interviewer raised two names that have received insufficient attention. Kevin Warsh, Trump's pick for Federal Reserve Chair, whose name appears in the Epstein files, and Howard Lutnick, whose photograph was in the files and whose information the administration reportedly made efforts to suppress. Garcia confirmed that these and other administration officials who appear in the files are on the committee's list. He said, quote, we're going to have a very long list on day one when we're in the majority of who we get to subpoena. That statement transforms this from a single hearing about Bondi into a roadmap for a comprehensive investigation that will touch every corner of the administration where Epstein connections exist. And that brings us to the critical question. Garcia was asked directly about Trump's repeated claim that he has been exonerated by the Epstein files. His response was the most direct and specific rebuttal any member of Congress has delivered. On this claim, he said, quote, that's a joke. Exonerated by who? No one's exonerated Donald Trump. He's the one that called it a hoax. He's in the Epstein files more than anyone. Mar-a-Lago is often dams where they trafficked women and girls. We have questions for the president. He's been named in the Epstein files multiple times. There are serious allegations against him that have been removed for reasons we don't understand. Every sentence in that statement carries specific factual weight. Trump appears in the files more than anyone else. Mar-a-Lago is identified as a location where trafficking occurred. Serious allegations against him were removed from the files, and the committee does not know why. Those are not partisan talking points. Those are factual assertions from the ranking member of the committee that has been reviewing the actual documents. And the committee now has the power through subpoena to compel Bondi to explain every one of those anomalies under oath. The bottom line is this. The institutional walls that the administration built around the Epstein investigation are being breached from the inside. Republican members of Trump's own party voted to subpoena his attorney general. The questions that will be asked under oath go directly to whether a White House cover-up is being directed from the top. The precedent for calling presidents to testify has been established by Republicans themselves. Administration officials whose names and photographs appear in the Epstein files are on the committee's future subpoena list, and the single most politically damaging issue for this president, more damaging than the economy, more damaging than healthcare, is now heading towards sworn testimony from the person who has been controlling the investigation. The question now isn't whether Bondi testifies. She will. The subpoena is what Garcia called ironclad. The question is what happens when she's under oath, and the committee asks who directed the cover-up, where the missing files went, and why serious allegations against the president were removed from the record. Those questions have been building for months. Now they will be asked in a hearing room, on camera, under penalty of perjury. And based on what the ranking member said today about the bipartisan pressure, the Republican support, and the precedent that has been set, Bondi's testimony may be the beginning, not the end, of what this committee demands. The next name on the list could be the president himself, and the president to make that happen was built by his own party,